And all the rabbis gather, and the first course is clams.
Mm-hmm.
And then the evening continues, and there is shrimp, and there are frog's legs in cream, and there are numerous other types of bivalves, as Rabbi Wise later describes them, and chaos ensues.
Was there a kosher option even?
From Unpacked, this is Jewish History Nerds, the podcast where we nerd out on awesome stories in Jewish history. I'm Yael Steiner.
And I'm Jonathan Schwab. Making this series especially on Jews in America has been really special and really fun. If you've been enjoying them, please share one of our episodes. Share a favorite with a friend, post about it on social media. Help these really interesting stories, very relevant to this year, reach more people. Yael, I think you have something completely different for us today, but perhaps related and perhaps more connections to what we've been exploring this series on Jews in America.
This is going to be a unique episode for us because it will get into some of the philosophical and theological underpinnings of various religious denominations within the American Jewish community. We are going to be talking about how changes in religious observance created controversy and positive and negative reactions throughout history. And I'm hoping merely to present them as historical happenings. I don't want people to think that I value or devalue any which way they choose to observe or not observe any religion.
With all of those caveats, I feel like this is going to be a really interesting episode if it's going to be getting that controversial.
It's also going to be a bit TMZ oriented. I don't know if you've ever seen TMZ, but
we're familiar with like the idea.
We're going to be talking about a social event, a really particularly gossiped about social event. Certainly, it didn't have the worldwide appeal of a Taylor Travis wedding, but it definitely did get press coverage and did create a controversy with some people finding it to be an extremely positive, cool thing that happened, and some people finding it tacky, and some people finding it to be an abomination.
Wow.
So,
so what are we talking about?
We are going to be talking about an evening in July 1883 that has since then been known as the Trefa Banquet.
Okay.
It was not then called the Trefa Banquet. It was never supposed to be. It wasn't
the invitation title.
No. What it was supposed to be was a dinner celebrating the first graduating class of rabbis from the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati who had just completed 8 years of rabbinical study. And their ordination had been earlier in the day. And the highfalutin Society Jews of Cincinnati sponsored a fairly lavish, appropriate for the Gilded Age dinner for the Jewish community at a hotel high upon a hill called Highland House. You had to take a funicular to get there.
Ooh, okay.
And it was multiple courses, and there were wine pairings, and it was extremely, I guess I used the word lavish already. I don't want to say gaudy because I have no way of knowing.
This is a big occasion. It's the first graduating class of the rabbinical school, Hebrew Union College, right? Which is Reform, right? Like Reform Jews.
Great question.
Okay. All right. But also, this is like a historic occasion for Jewish Americans because these are among the first, if not the first, like rabbis minted in America.
These are the first rabbis minted in America. The founder of Hebrew Union College, Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, who somebody will be talking about a lot in this episode, had tried to open a school called Maimonides College about a decade or so earlier, and it failed because ran out of money. So I want to go back to a question you lodged or a comment you made about Hebrew Union College being reform. In the current year, 2026, Hebrew Union College is the largest rabbinical school for the Reform movement, I think, in the world, certainly in the United States. And it's an extremely well-regarded institution that was founded in 1875, 8 years before these initial rabbis were ordained. But in 1875, and as was also true in 1883, the night of this extremely interesting banquet, which we'll hear a little bit more about in a few minutes, it wasn't clear if Hebrew Union College was capital R reform. We've spoken a bit about the evolution and the beginnings of the Reform movement. We did an episode a few seasons ago about Moses Mendelssohn, who did not consider himself to be a Reform Jew, but has been claimed by the Reform Jews as a forebear of their movement. The Reform movement, as we know it today, really originated in Germany in the first few decades of the 19th century. What the Reform Jews did at that point in time was try to make themselves more similar to their neighbors. This is in the wake of emancipation.
Of their non-Jewish German neighbors.
As we talked about in the past few episodes, there was never really a formal emancipation of Jews in the United States because as soon as the United States was founded, Jews were, quote unquote, equal citizens with all of their neighbors of various religions. And now this spirit of enlightenment leading to the emancipation of Jews in Europe has taken hold. And all of a sudden, German Jews are in fact German. And given this new freedom and the ability to fully participate in German civil life for the first time, the Jews wanted to be more like their neighbors. One of the things that they did was start translating some of their liturgy into German, having sermons given in German, which was incredibly, incredibly controversial, as crazy as that seems today. And one of the things that started initially being abandoned was kashrut, the Jewish dietary laws, particularly Jewish dietary restrictions. And one of the reasons that kashrut was abandoned so early, even before the head honchos of what would become capital R Reform Judaism decided what their theology was, is that kashrut and dietary differences creates separation. And these people wanted...
That's a huge barrier to I don't know, being a member of society, being able to relate to your neighbors, being able to have a meal with them.
Yes, and that's exactly what these people wanted. They wanted to be able to sit in a cafe in Hamburg and dine with their new co-citizens. And all of a sudden, they were given the opportunity to fit in, and they wanted it hook, line, and sinker. So kashrut does initially fall to the wayside among people who all of a sudden realize that maybe we can be Jews without being particularly Jewy. And instead of saying that we're foregoing religion altogether, we're going to say there is a new way to practice religion in the modern world. And that new way includes services in German. It includes, in some cases, holding our services on Sundays instead of Saturdays.
You are permitted to be part of society as Jews. We're not saying you need to become Christian, but it works better if you do it on similar terms. So it sounds like what you're describing is an adapting of Judaism to say we're still keeping some practices, but we're doing them in ways that allow us to fit in better to this society.
And the evolution of Reform Judaism, both theologically and on an organizational level, that happens in Germany earlier in the century. And moves to the United States, particularly in the 1840s. Many Reform communities spring up in the United States. And I would say that Reform Judaism had, in terms of religious influence, because in numbers, Reform Jews still are the vast majority of people who affiliate as Jews today in the United States. But in terms of religious influence and changing the way America views Judaism, I would say the years from 1840 through just before World War I, Reform Judaism has a huge influence. And, even so, we're talking about the spirit of emancipation, the spirit of the Enlightenment. After the Civil War, we have a different kind of emancipation and a different kind of spirit taking hold in the country. And there's this idea, and it started during the Revolution, it started during colonial times, of self-made men, all men being created equal. And what does that mean, and how does it play out? But Jews are building on this theological innovation that's taking place in Germany. The Jews in the United States are starting to live this themselves. The first innovation here is they start with family seating in the synagogue, which is something that the Protestants do. They start giving the sermon in German. Hugely controversial. Some of the congregations bring an organ into their synagogues. And one thing that, as these new synagogues are being built and as these new communities are being formed, which actually kind of moves with the manifest destiny of the United States, like Reform Judaism flourishes in the Midwest. As the American people are moving west and building new cities, those cities are becoming hotbeds of Reform Judaism. And when they build these new, beautiful, ornate synagogues, they are calling them temples. And they call them temples for two reasons. And this originates in Germany as well. One, matches other...
Right. Synagogue feels very, specifically Jewish. Right. Or shul, certainly, yeah. Feels very Jewish. But temple is that's a house of worship.
They started to call their shuls temples to match others, but also on a theological level to demonstrate that there is no longer one Jewish temple in Jerusalem that they are longing to return to. That era of messianic longing is over. And so we can have the Plum Street Temple in Cincinnati because we're not waiting to go back to the temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem.
Right. All right.
And that's a huge theological underpinning, as often gets mentioned today when we talk about Zionism and the right of return and Jews longing to return to the Holy Land or Judea. We talk about how in our liturgy there is the return to Zion, the return to certain sacrifices and certain worships that is part of our day-to-day beseeching of God. And here, the Reform Jews are saying, no.
So I assume, along with changing the names of their house of worship, that there's also a significant change in the liturgy. Because there's a lot, if you are taking out, return to Zion, there's a lot you got to take out.
There's a huge change to the liturgy. And Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, who is the one who founds the Hebrew Union College, he has a goal of writing a siddur, a prayer book, that will be for all American Jews. And at this point, they hadn't separated themselves out into true denominations. It was just that among Jews, there were lowercase r reformers, people trying to reform Judaism as a whole. They weren't advocating for a schism. It's just that we are American Jews. And as Jews living in America, there are certain reforms that we think should be made to the way that we practice Judaism.
We talked about this with Caribbean synagogues having a sand floor. There are so many places Jews have been, and there are so many customs and changes and amendments that have taken on a local flavor Although it sounds like this is sort of, rather than a gradual evolution that takes place over time, this is like a very quick sort of planned change.
It takes place over a couple of decades, but Isaac Mayer Wise particularly has a personal mission to create this unified American Jewish community. He writes this prayer book with facing pages, one page in German, one page in Hebrew, because he is truly a reformer. He is not an abandoner. Unfortunately, we just won't have time to talk about today Rabbi Einhorn, who was a much more radical reformer. Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise ultimately comes to be known as a more radical reformer as time goes by, and I'm going to hop to that in a second. But Rabbi Einhorn's Siddur that he writes is entirely in German.
None of it was in English?
But the Jews didn't speak English.
Right, the Jews did. Okay.
I think as time went on,
and there wasn't an idea of those people's kids are going to be speaking English.
Right. As time goes on, their documents come to be printed in English. But in terms of the preparation by these rabbis for these congregations that are full of immigrants, because the Jewish immigration to the United States from the 1810s to the 1860s is dominated by German Jews. It's almost entirely German Jews. So Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise has this desire to create a unified American Jewish community. And he creates an organization called the Union of American Hebrew Congregations that is, as it sounds, an umbrella organization for synagogues / shuls / temples.
Right. Hebrew congregations.
Hebrew congregations.
Yeah.
And it has what are more traditionalist, what we would now call Orthodox synagogues in it. And it has Reform synagogues in it. Rabbi Wise wanted it to be for everyone. And I think he thought over time everyone would come to this middle ground of a lowercase r Reformed traditional Judaism. So Hebrew Union College was not founded to be a specific denominational rabbinical school. It was founded to be an American rabbinical school training rabbis for American Judaism. And in 1883, it's both celebrating 10 years of this organization, the first graduating class of Hebrew Union College, and Jews from all over the country of all denominations, even though denominations as we think of them today didn't exist yet, but of all stripes and all types, descend on Cincinnati for this wonderful, auspicious occasion. The ordination happens during the day. It goes really well. It's lovely. There were traditional rabbis there, one of whom was Rabbi Benjamin Zold, the father of Henrietta Zold. Henrietta is actually in attendance. But there were more traditional rabbis there, less traditional rabbis there, and they were among those who felt that there could or should be a unifying force in American Judaism. And this was a particularly wonderful occasion to celebrate that and hopefully use as a springboard for the building of a further integrated Jewish community. Great, wonderful.
Great.
Cincinnati was a growing city. There were many financially successful Jews there, and some of the lay people decided they were going to sponsor a lavish banquet. So the whole community gets up on this funicular up to the beautiful Highland House. And this was very much a Gilded Age affair, 8 or 9 courses, planned by these lay leaders and catered by a Jew named Gus Lindemann. And all the rabbis gather and they get there. And the first course is clams. And then the evening continues and there is shrimp and there are frog's legs in cream and there are numerous other types of bivalves. Chaos ensues.
Was there a kosher option even? Or
was there a kosher option? Was that kosher?
Okay,
Was that kosher? Does kashrut matter? All of a sudden, these huge questions erupt, both in the moment, after the moment, and until today. Professor Jonathan Sarna, who is the dean of American Jewish history.
Yeah. He wrote the book.
He wrote the book, American
Judaism.
Judaism, which is excellent.
Literal book. Yeah.
He feels, and this is probably true, that none of this was intentional. There was no intentional statement of, we just ordained these new American rabbis, and by the way, American rabbis think it's cool to eat frogs' legs in cream.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't like intentional as a like political statement of the faith. The lavish dinner was planned by the lay leaders, and the lay leaders, who were these like Gilded Age business people in Cincinnati, this is what they said a lavish banquet looks like.
So today we call it the Trefa Banquet. Trefa meaning non-kosher, the epitome of non-kosher. And it is famous because of what ensued, but it wasn't as though you were invited to the first ordination at Hebrew Union College and then you were invited to the Trefa Banquet, at which time we will celebrate being in violation of the dietary laws of Judaism. That is not what happened. And I think this is, for most people, a forgotten episode in Jewish history, but the people who do know what it is, I think a large portion of them think that this was intentional.
Right.
I think before I started doing this research, I thought it was intentional.
Serving clams was not like being passed around during the like rabbinic ordination ceremony. Like they're not the same event.
Yes and no. What happens in the aftermath makes it unclear.
Right. Assume then there's not like an apology and retraction that
a few things happen. One is that a few rabbis actually run from the room in horror. A few rabbis stay and don't eat. And a few rabbis partake happily, which is probably what would happen if something like this happened today. But it's Rabbi Wise's response that makes this the historical event that it has become. Because what he could have done was immediately said, this was a terrible error. We are so sorry. We did not mean to offend anyone. We did not mean to take a specific stance on dietary laws. We apologize. This was a caterer error. This was a planning error. Done. That was one possibility. That didn't happen. A second possibility is that the people, the lay people and the caterer actually thought that they were preparing a kosher meal. And that the only thing that you needed...
The caterer was a Jewish guy.
The caterer was Jewish, and the people who planned it were Jewish. And one theory is they were informed by Rabbi Wise, or, the administration of the seminary, that, by the way, this dinner that you're making for us, it should be kosher. And they said, cool, we'll make it kosher. Course, We're just not going to serve pork. And the only thing that we need to make a meal kosher is to not have pork. And one of the reasons why people think this is the most likely scenario is that
they didn't serve pork.
They
of
didn't
all the many things that they served.
They didn't. Oh, by the way, they also served ice cream, I should note. So it was both the bivalves, the frog's legs in cream, and then the ice cream and cheese as well.
Oh, because you're saying like that, like because the ice cream and the cheese is dairy. And
dairy.
You're mixing it with, interesting. Right. From my observance of kasher, which is an orthodox I was like, oh, clams, which are not kosher. Do they count? Like, would they, if you were counting them as kosher, would they count as meat that you can't mix them with dairy? That's like
they didn't get into that.
But they did not serve pork.
There was this sense that as observance or lack of observance was changing among American Jews, that we're making a kosher meal. And what makes our meal kosher is that it doesn't have pork.
I feel like I've come across that or encountered that of like people's understanding of kosher is like, okay, no pork and some sort of like it needs to be overseen or blessed by a rabbi, something like that. Like, so
I want you to keep that in mind for a little bit later. But to go back to why people think that maybe Gus Lindemann and the other laymen maybe thought this was a kosher meal was the fact that they didn't serve pork because, and I had never heard this before. Apparently, at that point in American history, Cincinnati was known as Porkopolis. It was apparently a huge both business and consumption center for pork. Like it was alleged.
So the omission of pork from the menu,
correct,
like has to be a big intentional statement.
Right. It's like, this is a city where everybody eats pork all the time. We're the pork capital. It would be like not serving cheese in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Right.
Like, we didn't serve pork for a reason, because otherwise there would be pork everywhere.
Right.
I didn't know this about the pork industry in Cincinnati, but the word Porkopolis specifically came up in a bunch of stuff that I read. So that is why there are a lot of people who feel that the caterer was advised that this should be a kosher meal, and what made it a kosher meal was the omission of pork. Again, something very easily explainable, where you could, Rabbi Wise could say, I apologize, I wasn't clear enough. There is more to Jewish dietary restrictions than the omission of pork. But I certainly didn't mean to offend anyone. Let's go. That didn't happen either. What happened was Rabbi Wise got very defensive. At first, he maybe was slightly apologetic, but he later went on to say, by the way, oysters are vegetables of the sea. And therefore not kosher. Apparently people loved oysters back then. Oysters were a staple of the Gilded Age. And I think the omission of oysters would have been just as big of a statement as the omission of pork, because apparently,
where are the oysters?
Apparently at the time, they believe it probably has changed because, first of all, because of demand, but also because of environmental changes. But apparently the bushels of oysters that were being taken from and then sold from the Chesapeake Bay area were in the billions at this time, literally billions of bushels of oysters. So there, apparently Rabbi Wise got to a point where he was like, oysters are really vegetables and I don't know enough about different types of seafood. I just know that the majority opinion of people who observe Orthodox kosher laws is that oysters are not allowed. But it appears that Rabbi Wise maybe had a rationale as to why they were. But ultimately, he doesn't apologize.
But it wasn't just, like you also said, shrimp.
There was shrimp there. There was clams, frog's legs, ice cream, cheese, wine pairings. Rabbi Wise was one of the people who realized that you could use the press to spread ideas very quickly, and that was part of what made him successful. And he had 2 publications, one in English, one in German. And he was always more forthright in his German publication. And in his German publication, he makes it seem like the people making a big deal of this are kind of provincial.
Yeah.
And this isn't a big deal. And that goes along with this notion of kitchen Judaism. Have you ever heard of kitchen Judaism?
No.
I had not. This is something that I read about Rabbi Wise's response to the Trefa Banquet mishigas that followed. In responding to what he considered the real issue, he soon abandoned all talk of a caterer's oversight and transformed the Highland House dinner first into a test case of liberal convictions and gradually into an active assertion of the new Judaism. Thus, in Die Deborah, which is his German publication, of November 2nd, 1883, Wise insisted that further explanations of the Trefa Banquet were unnecessary because the large majority of American Jews were indifferent to dietary laws and because Orthodox Jewish customs cheapened Judaism before the public. And him not going into further explanations is also what creates uncertainty here, because we don't have a ton of written memorialization of how he felt about this or what happened or how other people in his sphere felt about this. And we don't know if that is because it was really an error and therefore they felt like it was kind of fixed already. It's like, yeah, we made a mistake, let's move on. Or if it was because...
And also, if the error was made by the very wealthy lay leaders, like, you don't want to sell those people out. Those are...
That's true. That's true. I didn't see that mentioned anywhere, but that's a very good point. But also because we don't need to comment on it because no one cares. Like, the people who ran out of the room cared. They're back in New York. They're back in whatever city they came from.
Which you said you like really knew how to use the press. Like, that's a great political move, right? If there's a conversation of like, what is Judaism and what does it represent, then the more traditional provincial rabbis are complaining about the menu at the event. I think that's like a great way for Rabbi Wise to frame it of like, let's talk about what Judaism represents. Like, these people want to, I don't know, keep debating the menu, and like I'm talking about big ideas and what the future of American Judaism is.
And those big ideas will get elucidated 2 years later in 1885 in what is known as the Pittsburgh Platform, which is a hugely important statement of the ideals of Reform Judaism. Quickly before we get to that, I want to talk about this concept of kitchen Judaism, which is an extremely demeaning saying. I think it
feel
both
like now
has...
I like understand where it might be going, but
It's both demeaning to people who are strictly observant, and it's also misogynistic.
Yes.
Like it makes it seem like the Judaism of the kitchen, which for so many centuries and to so many people is so holy, so many centuries sustained us, and to so many people is like this bedrock of Judaism of the women of the house preparing kosher meals, preparing for Shabbat, lighting the Shabbat candles, teaching their children, is such an important part of Judaism, is being completely demeaned here. And one of Wise's followers, a Dr. Schreiber in Denver, wrote, I think in the Denver paper, he described Wise's critics as ignorant fanatics and as a fitting occasion to relegate kitchen Judaism to the antique cabinet where it belongs. And then he goes on to say, the humbug of the dietary laws must go, for they promote clannishness, Jewish exclusiveness, even fanaticism, and they make Judaism, quote, ridiculous, Lilliputian, and demeaning. So how many words can you use to make something small? Lilliputian. And he says specifically promote clannishness, which is something that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, how Jews really wanted to be a part of society and be a part of the world around them. Obviously, clannishness goes against that.
Yeah.
So this is an ethos that's taking hold among the reformers, where these dietary laws, restrictions, household, they call it kitchen Judaism. I would call it household Judaism.
Yeah.
Is really not important.
Yeah.
And that Judaism moves specifically to the synagogue, or to, in their words, the temple.
The temple.
They start doing their candle lighting at the temple. They do kiddush at the temple. Things that were part of being Jewish in your core, in your home, now move to become ceremonial and communal. And they're part of this once a week tradition that we keep in the same way that all of our Christian friends go to church. And there's nothing about us at home or on the street that makes us different than anybody else.
Interesting. I have like a couple of thoughts on this kitchen Judaism idea. First of all, it's very I think it's a very demeaning way of like putting a certain observance. It reminded me of, we talked about the crypto Jews of Portugal, people who converted in name to Catholicism, but kept Jewish practices in secret And like with the threat of danger for many, many, many generations. And one of the details there in that story was this like very elaborate process to create this dish that looked like pork so that their neighbors would not suspect them, but was not made of pork, you know? And I see, but like I think both sides of this, like this is what Judaism is. This is what Jewish religious practice is. We are keeping this alive, you know, for many, many years. And this isn't some small thing that's like isolated to the kitchen. I do hear the other argument of just like, that's not where we are anymore. That's not what like passing Jewish practice on could be. Like, let's think in a big way about like what Judaism could be and is and should be passed on. And like, we don't need to think in those terms anymore, but like we can think in Jewishness beyond the kitchen, which there's something very appealing about that.
One of the things that happens, that transpires in the immediate wake of the Trefa Banquet, or the Highland House affair, as some people refer to it, is that some of the rabbis who were either themselves present or heard about what had occurred, who had been members of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, or who had been part of Rabbi Wise's attempt to create this unified Jewish world, and were okay with reforming certain elements of their observance, decided that this reform has gone too far and we need to turn inward. And they are the ones who, not immediately, but ultimately start the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, which is a more lowercase c conservative seminary as opposed to Hebrew Union Seminary. Now, today, the Jewish Theological Seminary is the flagship institution of capital C conservative Judaism. That was not the case at the time. Before we get to the Pittsburgh Platform, I want to talk about two important rabbis who the dialectic between the two of them helps create what the Pittsburgh Platform itself, because there is one who is considered a reformer and there's one who is considered a radical reformer. And those are Rabbi Alexander Kohut, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. It's Kohut. And one is Rabbi Kaufman Kohler. Rabbi Kaufman Kohler is the son-in-law of Rabbi David Einhorn, who was the more radical reformer that I had mentioned earlier. And Kaufman Kohler and Alexander Kohut engaged in some debates that played out in the press and in the public because they were torn on how this reform should play out. And the New York Times actually covered this. I just want to read you an excerpt. The headline is, Rabbi Kohut censures the practices of Jewish reformers. And that's in response to the Pittsburgh Platform. And Rabbi Kohut says in response to the Pittsburgh Platform, many priests today do not represent the symbol of the Maccabees, which is light and warmth. They should not be modern Greeks and hail all that is foreign to them. When I hint of foreign elements, I have reference to Sunday services. They are an imitation of Christian customs. And while I possess the highest estimation of all religions, it is my aim and purpose to use my strength for the preservation of Judaism, pure and undefiled. And although Judaism advocates the promulgation of lessons on every day, it is against the spirit of Judaism to single out that day, which strictly belongs to other religions. Let us not be called usurpers. And he elucidates a concern that I hadn't really thought about, which is, at what point does imitating the Christians beget anti-Semitism instead of alleviate anti-Semitism?
Interesting.
Like, at what point do they say, you guys are not Christians. You are the antithesis of Christians. You have not accepted Jesus. Stop doing what we do and pretending, because it demeans Christianity to say, you can pretend to be a Christian.
The image that he brings up of the Maccabees and the Hellenists is like, I think, I don't know, like one of the the fundamental core, questions of like, as Judaism evolves, as we take on new practices, or as we change things, or as we like adapt to different types of environments, like how far do you go?
One of the first things that capital R Reform Jews change about their practice is they drop the second day of Yom Tov outside of Israel because it doesn't speak to them practically, which is also a reason why a lot of them drop kashrut, because it doesn't speak to them practically.
Yeah.
A huge theological underpinning of all of this is that Judaism should be about morality, and everything that's not really about morality should fall to the wayside, which has evolved until today into making tikkun olam, fixing the world and social justice, like the main pillar of Reform Judaism. Yeah. To use a culinary metaphor, like, is it watered down Judaism?
Oh, yeah. Great,
or is it a reduction in which only the core flavor and the most important element remains? And I think that, there are outsiders to Reform Judaism who sometimes castigate it as watered down. And then there are advocates who say, no, it's not watered down. It's distilled to its holiest level. And that comes out in the
This isn't artificial flavoring. This is like authentic, chicken stock.
It's concentrate.
Like, what's being debated here is like what American Judaism will look like. And that, now in retrospect, we can see was hugely consequential, because like this is now the center of like what Judaism will evolve into over the next 150 years.
1,000%. I just want to tie something back to something we talked about when we talked about religious liberty. So I mentioned they drop the second day of Yom Tov. They make certain changes to the liturgy, aside from complete linguistic changes, in removing certain sections about the sacrifices in the temple, and also removing certain language about chosenness. Because, and we'll see that also in the Pittsburgh Platform, which is that we view Judaism as the highest level of dedication to God, but we view sort of all levels of dedication to God as important. But another thing that has gone back and forth in whether or not it's included in the Reform liturgy, but was taken out in these early Reform prayer books, is Kol Nidre. And we talked about that with respect to whether or not Jews can take oaths in court and be believed, and how the fact that certain people knew that Jews absolve themselves of all of their oaths every Yom Kippur makes them less trustworthy. There were factions among the Reform, and this played out in their prayer books, who said, we can't do this. We are now part of a larger whole. We're not only doing business with ourselves. How could we ever possibly be a part of a citizenry or do business with Christians if we up front say we don't stand behind our promises?
I'm slightly confused by that, because I'm sorry, is your issue not fulfilling like commitments that you have made? Like you don't want to like stand behind that?
You also can still fulfill your commitments and say Kol Nidre. Like it's not locking you into being a dishonest business person. But I did think that was interesting, in that something that was used as a charge against Jews in the context of taking an oath in court was then used by people instituting reforms to say, we don't want this to be taken against us, and we want to be part of the citizenry and the Rotary Club and the business community. And therefore, we are going to remove that from our liturgy because we don't want to be known as a people who don't stand behind their word. Let's move to the Pittsburgh Platform, which, as I mentioned, was elucidated at a conference of the Reform movement in Pittsburgh in 1885, which was technically chaired by Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, I think because he was the figurehead, but it was convened at the instigation of Rabbi Kaufman Kohler, who I talked about earlier, who was more reform than Rabbi Kohat.
More radical.
More radical. And these were instituted in 1885, and they remained the basic tenets of institutionalized Reform Judaism until another revision in Columbus, Ohio in 1937. Reform Judaism was huge in the Midwest. There are 8 tenets, and I'm not going to read through all 8 of them. I will read the first one because it goes with what we talked about with respect to differing from your co-citizenry, which is we recognize in every religion an attempt to grasp the infinite, and in every mode, source, or book of revelation held sacred in any religious system, the consciousness of the indwelling of God in man. We hold that Judaism presents the highest conception of the God idea as taught in our holy scriptures and developed and spiritualized by the Jewish teachers. There's more, but I just wanted to show you how, while they do say Judaism is the highest conception of the God idea, there is the first sentence of this platform, which is supposed to be the founding canonical text of this movement. It's, we recognize in every religion an attempt to grasp the infinite.
I'm sure that people have like dissected this and looked at, like, to me, that smacks of this is like the new conception of how do we talk about a replacement for a chosenness, right? Or like recognition of God, right? Like, yeah. And I guess that it, like they're saying, like all religions are an expression of a search for God, right? Which I don't, like, it's funny to me because I'm like, I hear that first part and I'm like, yeah, I think that's like very much how even Orthodox Jews, when they're speaking publicly, would frame things today of like, we recognize the value of like all religions and we see ourselves as like part, but then like the Judaism is like the highest. I was like, whoa, I think like Orthodox Jews in very public spheres wouldn't even say that today.
Right. That's 100%. It's just, it's one of the highest conceptions. The next are about tikkun olam and social justice, which is one is that Judaism is a progressive religion ever striving to be in accord with the postulates of reason. Christianity and Islam, as daughter religions of Judaism, aid in spreading the monotheistic moral truth, and that all of humanity is our ally in the fulfillment of our mission, which is to extend the hand of fellowship to all who cooperate with us in the establishment of reign of truth and righteousness of all men, among men. 7 says we don't believe in heaven and hell. The soul is immortal, but we are not rooted in bodily resurrection or damnation to hell.
You know what this also reminds me a lot of, and it feels like it must be somewhat intentional, the 13 principles of faith. According to Maimonides, right? Like it's like point by point rejection of all of these.
That, and it reminds me of something else, which I'm going to get to as soon as I say the 8th one, which is really the pure, the concentrated tikkun olam tenet, which is in full accordance with the spirit of the Mosaic legislation, which strives to regulate the relations between rich and poor. We deem it our duty to participate in the great task of modern times, to solve on the basis of justice and righteousness the problems presented by the contrasts and evils of the present organization of society. So we are here to help the poor, to create justice. And what this all says to me, in addition to what you were saying about a refutation of the 13 principles of faith, is this is we hold these truths to be self-evident moment for Reform Judaism. It is a declaration of independence. And Rabbi Wise actually talks about it as a declaration of independence for Reform Judaism, which leads me to my question that I don't think we're going to have time to talk about in full, which is, could Reform Judaism that may have started in Germany, could Reform Judaism have flourished the way it has anywhere but the United States of America?
Right. Yeah. I think no. Of course this took place in America. And of course America then like shifts to become, in many ways, the center of Jewish practice, at least until the founding of the state of Israel, and in many ways, I think still represents a very important center of Jewish life because of what is unique about this country. There is a lot of shared similarities between like traditional Jewish ideas and American ideas, and America is a great place to be open to this development.
But it just goes to show you that when you create a pluralistic Judaism, or when you create a Judaism that has outside influences that aren't strictly coming from the 5 books of Moses, or in some cases the Talmud, or in some cases commentaries on the Talmud, depending on your community, there are going to be conflicts that arise. And whose voice emerges is really important. And the Trefa Banquet brought that out. And we don't have time, but if any of you are interested in looking into it, there was something called the Trefa Banquet 2.0 in San Francisco in 2018 that, to me, did exactly what it said it wasn't going to do. It was just designed to celebrate the food culture of the Jewish community in San Francisco, which by and large wasn't kosher. And therefore, as we were just going to get together and eat treif food that the people in this food community prepare because kashrut is not an important part of our Judaism and it's not meant to insult anyone. But the more I read about it, the more it seemed specifically not that, because you can do that. You can get together as many Jews as you want and have as much bacon as you want and not call it a Trefa Banquet and just be like, we don't subscribe by dietary rules. And if we don't, then there's no such thing as kosher, but there's also no such thing as treif. If you're calling it treif, there's a reason. And we don't have time to get into that. And that was also hotly debated. And I'll leave it at this, which was Dr. Jonathan Sarna wrote an article responding to that event. And he closed his article by saying that he hopes that this Trefa Banquet 2.0 does not create the division in the community that the first Trefa Banquet created. So that is its legacy. Its legacy is not an accident. Its legacy is this was a huge turning point, certainly in American Jewish history, even if the way it started was simply a catering error.
Thanks for listening to Jewish History Nerds, brought to you by Unpacked, an OpenDor Media brand.
If you like this show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and please give us a rating and review. It really helps new listeners find the show.
Check out unpacked.media for everything Unpacked related, and go to Spotify or YouTube to watch our latest videos.
Most importantly, be in touch. Write to us at nerds@unpacked.media. We really love to hear from you. Jewish History Nerds is hosted by me, Yael Steiner.
And by me, Jonathan Schwab. Our education lead is Dr. Henry Abramson, and our editors are Rob Pera and Ari Schlacht.
We're produced by Jenny Falcon. Thanks for listening.